Hey traders, it's John Fortune here of this week's Weekly Forex Forecast. We're going to run through over 30 markets, highlighting targets in each market for the week ahead. And as we go through the markets, we're going to build out a high probability watch list along the way for next week. So I hope you're having a nice weekend. Let's jump over to the charts and see where the money is this week. Starting as we always do with the US dollar index. Now in last week's video, we were looking for a move into the 92.74. And I did note that the dollar was bullish, but bullish to neutral. And once we traded into the 92.74, there was a good chance we could start to reverse lower. I do go into this week with a bullish bias on the dollar. We are still trending to the upside. And if we are going to reverse, we need to see that reversal from this area first before we start to look for short positions or become bearish on the DXY. So we did take out the target set last week at the 92.74. Going into this week, I am bullish on the US dollar as a bias. Any correction in this market is going to be viewed next week as an opportunity to look for further advances in the DXY up to the 93.51. And this means I will be preferencing long dollar positions in the US dollar pairs next week. So again, I go into next week with a long bias on the US dollar. Next is crude oil. Now last week we were looking for a decline into the 57.25. We did have a really nice sell-off into this area and we took this target out to the pip. Going into this week, I do still favour short positions in this market. We've started to correct. Any continued correction will simply be viewed again as another opportunity to look for short positions in this market down to the next key of support to the downside and the target set at the 56.44. It's not going on the high probability watch list this week purely because this is a counter trend trade overall, but I do still favour short positions in crude oil. Next is euro dollar. Last week we were looking for declines into the 1.18270 and we also took out target 2 from last week at the 1.1770. That was pretty much the move in euro dollar last week. Coming into this week, this market goes on the high probability watch list. I do like this market and I am interested in short positions. For those of you who like your wave counts, it looks like we have 1, 2, 3 and we're due a 4 and a 5th wave down. So any correction in this market next week will be viewed as an opportunity to look for short positions once again. I'm going to be looking down towards the next key of support to the downside and the target set at the 1.1705. Next is pound dollar. Last week we were looking for declines into the 1.3758 and we did take out this target last week and we started to correct. This correction is simply viewed once again as another opportunity to look for bearish reversals in this market down towards the next key of support to the downside and the target set and the 1.3620. Next is US dollar Japanese yen. Now last week we were looking for a rally into the 109.85 and you can see we just missed it here by 0.02 of a pip. So depending on your data feed, you would either have taken this target out or just slightly missed it. Because we just slightly missed it on the chart where we do the weekly forex forecast, we've left this on. But if you've taken this out, you can take this level off. What I'd be looking for next week, and this market does go down on the high probability watch list, we have really nice momentum. Any correction, maybe we take out the target first. Any correction in this market will once again be viewed as another opportunity to look for bullish reversals up towards the next key of resistance, the upside and target 2 at the 110.74. Aussie dollar. Last week I was looking for a breakout to the upside in this market. You can see for anybody who's done the free GMT course, there is no breakout here. This is a continuation of the trend to the downside and we started to break low with that dollar strength last week. Very simply put, going into this week, I do favour short positions in this market. We've started to correct and with that dollar strength, any continued correction is simply viewed as an opportunity to look for bearish breakouts down towards the next key of support to the downside and the target set, the 0.7508. New Zealand dollar. I am looking for short setups in this market this week. We have really strong momentum. Again, looks like 1, 2, 3, and it looks like a 4th wave that we are coming into for another 5th wave down. So any correction, what looks to be a 4th wave, as this continues, I will be looking next week for a break lower. And I'm going to be looking at initiating shorts down towards the next key of support to the downside at the 0.6915. This is a market that does go on the high probability watch list next week. Next is US dollar Swiss franc. US dollar Swiss franc is also showing this kind of setup where we have 1, 2, and then a 3rd wave, and it looks like we're due a 4th wave for a 5th wave up. So any correction, especially if we don't take out the target first at 0.94260, any correction in this market next week will be viewed as an opportunity to look for bullish reversals up towards the next key of resistance, the upside and the target set at the 0.9426. And if we can get a break through here, we're going to be looking up to target 2 at the 0.9530. Next is US Dollar Cad. Now, US Dollar Cad, I don't really like US Dollar Cad going into next week because we are structured to the downside, but I have a bullish bias on the dollar index, so it doesn't make too much sense to me. I think this market could get choppy next week. I will probably leave this market next week, but if you are interested in trading this, the opportunity I would be looking for is any break to the downside in this market would be viewed as the opportunity to look for short positions down to the next key of support to the downside and the target set at 1.2363. Next is gold. Now, gold, very much like the US dollar CAD, is structured opposite to my dollar strength bias going into next week. You can see gold is actually structured to the upside, and last week it went nowhere, and this is because there is some strength in gold to the upside, but it's being capped by the strong dollar. It's unlikely I'll be trading this market next week, very similar to US dollar CAD, but if you do want to trade this, and I think it could continue to be choppy next week if the dollar's strong, if you do want to trade this, I would be looking for any continued correction in this market to be viewed as the opportunity to look for a bullish breakout up towards the next target to the upside at the 1760.70. So in terms of the dollar pairs, I do like the dollar pairs next week, and I do favor a long bias in the dollar index. The markets that I prefer out of the dollar pairs are Euro dollar and New Zealand dollar to the downside, and US dollar yen and US dollar franc to the upside. Next is Euro Yen. Now, last week we were looking for short positions into the 128.47. You can see we pulled back and we came right into this level last week, and that was a really nice sell-off. We've left this target on here this week simply because we bounced and we almost closed the week back where we started. So this really becomes exactly the same setup as we looked at last week. Any continued correction will be viewed once again as an opportunity to look for bearish reversals down to the next key of support to the downside and the same targets as last week at the 128.47. Next is Franc Yen. Now, for everybody who follows the forecast, you will know that this has been my least favorite pair over the last month or so. And that is because the Franc and the Yen are quite weak currencies, and that means the market is likely to be choppy. If you go and pull up a chart of Franc Yen, you'll see just how choppy this market has been. And it's been a very good idea not to be allocating capital in this market, but instead putting it into other markets where we can get more explosive moves. Having said that, if you are looking to trade this next week, and I will not be, any correction in this market with this momentum should be viewed as the opportunity to look for bearish reversals down to the next key of support to the downside and the target set at the 115.65. Next is Pound Yen. Now, last week we were looking for declines into the 149.20, and we started the week here and we sold off right into the target set last week and we bounced. Now, in the same way that Euro Yen did this, we bounced and we closed the week right back where we started the week. So the target remains the same for this week. We are looking for the 149.20 again. Any reversal in this market will be viewed next week as the opportunity to look for short positions down to the next key of support to the downside of the target set at the 149.20. Next is Aussie Yen. Like the other yen pairs, we sold off in Aussie Yen last week and we had some really nice momentum to the downside. So going into this week, I do favor short positions in this market. Any reversal to the downside is going to be viewed as the opportunity to look for short positions down to the next key of support to the downside and target set at the 82.10. You'll notice that there are very few markets going on the high probability watch list this week, and that's because everything that I do here is data driven and the markets are drying up in terms of volatility, and this will naturally restrict the watch list. And as the markets start to expand and become more volatile and opportunities start to appear, you will see the watch list start to expand with it as well. Next is Cad Yen. This is a market that goes down on the high probability watch list. I do like this market to the upside. All of this is one move to the upside, and we've started to break out of this correction now in Cad Yen. So any correction to the downside in this market will be viewed as an opportunity to look for bullish reversals up towards the next key of resistance to the upside and the target set at the 88.47. New Zealand Yen, we had a big sell-off last week as we saw that rebalancing at the end of the quarter, people taking profits, and you see the yen spike and seeing some strength come into the yen as people are booking profits over the first quarter. Very simply put, going into this week with this correction, any continued correction will be viewed in the short term as an opportunity to look for bearish reversals down to the next key of support to the downside of the target set at 75.57. Euro Frank is structured to the upside. I do favor long positions in this market. We've started to break out of this bigger correction, so any pullback towards the 1.10390 will be viewed next week as the opportunity to look for bullish reversals up to the next key of resistance to the upside and target set at the 1.1148. Euro New Zealand, another big move to the upside, another risk off move because We're seeing reflationary risk on trades throughout the quarter, and then at the end of the quarter, those trades are closed. So the opposite to risk on, of course, being risk off. So you see the euro strengthening against the New Zealand commodity currency. We're starting to flag here in terms of a bull flag. So this continued correction next week will be viewed as an opportunity to look for bullish reversals in this market. And if we get the right setup, we start to break to the upside, we're going to be looking up towards the next key of resistance to the upside at the 1.7104. Euro Aussie, I do favour long positions in this market. We've started to correct, so any continued correction will be the opportunity to look for bullish reversals and a breakout to the upside. And we start to break out to the upside next week, going to be looking up towards the next key of resistance to the upside and the target set at the 1.5611. Euro pound was on the high probability watch list pretty much all year, and then we took it off recently because it started to get a little bit choppy. I do still favour short positions in this market, however, even though it is not on the high probability watch list currently. Any correction, therefore, will be viewed as an opportunity to look for bearish breakouts and reversals in this market, down towards the next key of support to the downside, the 0.8488. Next is Euro Cad. Now Euro Cad does go down once again on the high probability watch list to the downside. This is a market that I highlighted over the last 3-4 videos that this is one of my favourite pairs, and since we've been highlighting this has had a really nice move to the downside. It's been one of the best markets. Last week we were looking for further declines. We'd started to correct and we have now made our way down towards the target. We didn't take it out, but anybody who's in this from last week, I would be expecting the target to be taken out. For anybody not involved, what we'd need to see is any correction once again before taking out the target would be viewed as the opportunity to look for bearish breakouts once again down to the 1.4772, or if we take out the target first and then bounce and correct, you can look down to target 2 at the 1.4686. Pound Franc, this was a market on the high probability watch list last week to the upside. We did have a nice rally in this market, but we didn't take out the 1.3015. We came quite close. So very simply put, any continued correction in this market this week is just viewed as another opportunity to look for bullish reversals up towards the next key of resistance, the upside, and the target highlighted from last week at the 1.3015. Pound Aussie, this is a market down on the high probability watch list to the upside this week. I do like this market, although it has been quite choppy recently. What I'd need to see is any continued correction, as we're already starting to get, would be viewed as the opportunity to look for bullish reversals and breakouts in this market. And if we start to break to the upside, we're going to be looking at initiating longs up towards the next key of resistance, the upside, and the target set at 1.8215. Pound Cad doesn't go down on the watch list this week. I think there are better markets out there, but if you are looking to trade this, it is structured to the downside and I would prefer short positions in this market. We've already pulled back and tested the 1.73510, so this would be the area I would start to look for bearish reversals in Pound Cad down to the next key of support to the downside and the target set at the 1.7148. Pound New Zealand, this market does go down on the watch list this week. We have some nice momentum and we're coming quite close to the target. So what I'd really like to see in this market to get some good risk to reward is a correction, a deeper correction in this market. And that would allow us to look for bullish reversals and breakouts in this market. And if we get this kind of price action, we're going to be looking at initiating longs up towards the next key of resistance, the upside and target set, the 1.9798. And if we come up and take this out first and then correct, we'll be looking up towards the second target to the upside, the 1.9922. Next is Aussie Frank. Now Aussie Frank is not down on the watch list this week. The next major target to the downside is 0.6990, so I would be looking for it to come down to this level. However, it may take 2 weeks to get here, so we've already started to correct. If you are looking at trading Aussie Frank, I would be only interested in short positions next week, and any bearish breakout to the downside would be viewed as an opportunity to look for short positions. First of all, down to the previous lows if you want a conservative target for next week, and then eventually onto the next key area of support to the downside and the target set at the 0.6990. Next is Aussie Cad. Now Aussie Cad is down on the watch list this week, and I must say I do like the look of this market going into next week. We have really nice momentum to the downside, and we also have, by the looks of it, the 1, 2, and then the third wave, and now a fourth wave correction for a fifth wave down. And you can see we sit right here. We missed this target last week just by a couple of pips at the 0.9523, so I do think this target could be taken out this week. any continued correction for what looks like this fourth wave would be viewed as the opportunity to look for short positions in this market down to the next key area of support to the downside and the target set from last week, 0.9523. Aussie Cad, certainly one to keep an eye on next week. Aussie New Zealand, we did take out both targets to the upside last week, and you can see 3 times we tested the 1.0929, and that was the high in this market last week. Very simply put, going into this week, any correction in this market once again would be viewed as the opportunity to look for bullish reversals up towards the next key area of resistance, the upside and the target set at the 1.0980. Next is New Zealand Cad. Now last week we took out both targets to the downside. We smashed through the first target and we pretty much finished the week at target 2. Going into this week, I do really like this market. We discussed earlier that I liked Aussie Cad to the downside, and we've just looked at a chart showing the Australian dollar appreciating in value against the New Zealand dollar. So if Aussie Cad is going to come down, you're going to see New Zealand Cad coming down, if not faster, next week. Certainly one to watch. I will be keeping my eye on this. Any continued correction will be viewed as an opportunity next week to look for short positions in this market down towards the next key area of support to the downside and the target set at the 0.8699. New Zealand Frank, this market is structured to the downside and we had some really nice momentum, so I would not be surprised to see lower lows in this market, but it does not go on the watch list. I would prefer, for example, New Zealand Cad over New Zealand Frank. If you are looking to trade this, any correction as we're already getting is viewed as the opportunity to start to look for bearish reversals down to the next key area of support to the downside and the target set at the 0.6503. And last but not least, we have Cad Frank. Now, ever since you guys started asking me in the comments section what my favorite pair was each week, every single week I've managed to get it right, and every single week we've taken out the target and finished on a positive note in that market. Last week, my choice was Cad Frank. Pablo asked me in the comments. We did have a nice move to the upside, but for the first week, we just stopped shy. We didn't quite come up to the target. So if you did buy Cad Frank last week at the start of the week and you closed out at the end of the week, well, you still would have made money, but it was the first week we didn't quite get to the target. Having said that, any correction in this market this week, I am looking for it to come and take out the target, if not last week, this week. Any correction would simply just be viewed as another opportunity to look for long positions in this market up towards the next key area of resistance, the upside of the target set at 0.7503. And if we bounce first from this target and we take it out and then correct, I would be looking up towards the next key area of resistance, the upside and target 2 at 0.7569. So that is it for me for this week, guys. That is my watch list going into next week, and those are the pairs I'm going to be focused on most of all next week. As always, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please let me know by liking, sharing, and subscribing. A big thank you to everybody who does that on a regular basis, and a big thank you to everybody who has subscribed to the channel so far, and everybody who comments on the channel on a regular basis as well. I want to wish you all a fantastic weekend, and I want to wish you all the best in your trading next week. The only thing left to say is take care, and don't forget to trade safely.